Texas Hill Country, 1858, a land where survival required the strength and endurance of youth. But for Eleanor Sullivan, a woman of 46 winters, her greatest sin wasn't the successful cattle ranch she had helped build through 2 decades of drought and Comanche raids. It was the silver threading through her auburn hair and the wisdom lines etched upon her face. Cast out by her own family into the merciless Texas wilderness, she was left to die with nothing but contempt as her farewell. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. They called her useless, a burden past her prime, but the Comanche people who found her collapsed beside her dying horse saw something her own blood couldn't recognize: courage, resilience, and a spirit that refused to surrender. And among them was a war chief named Tall Feather, whose own painful story would become intertwined with hers in ways neither could have imagined. The grandfather clock in the parlor struck 12, its deep chimes resonating through the ranch house. Eleanor Sullivan sat perfectly straight in her chair, hands folded in her lap, as her nephew William paced the polished wooden floor before her. Outside, a late autumn storm lashed at the windows, the wind carrying the promise of an early winter across the Texas Hill Country. "We've discussed this extensively, Aunt Eleanor," William said, running a hand through his sandy hair, avoiding her gaze. At 33, he had inherited his father's height and commanding presence, along with the prosperous Double S ranch that had been built by Eleanor's late brother Samuel. "The simple fact is that we can no longer afford to maintain." "You hear?" Eleanor kept her expression composed, though her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. "This has been my home for 22 years, William. I helped your father build every fence post, every corral. I nursed your mother through 3 difficult births and taught you your letters by this very fireplace. And we're all very grateful." William's wife, Charlotte, interjected from her seat by the window, her voice soft but her blue eyes cool and calculating. "But things have changed. The drought has affected the herd. Markets in San Antonio are paying less for cattle this year. We must make adjustments." Eleanor noted how Charlotte's hand rested protectively over her swollen belly, 7 months gone with their 3rd child. A daughter, if the ancient signs were to be believed, the way she carried the child high and her craving for sweet things. "I understand financial hardship," Eleanor replied carefully. "I lived through the terrible drought of 42 with your father. We survived by reducing the herd, planting more grain, preserving every scrap of food. I can help with economies, William. I need little for myself." William finally stopped pacing and fixed Eleanor with a look she recognized all too well, the same stubborn determination her brother had shown when his mind was set. "It's not merely a question of economy, Aunt. It's about practicality." He gestured vaguely at her. You're not as strong as you once were. Charlotte needs help with the children and the household, someone who can keep up with the demands of a growing family." "I see." Eleanor felt a chill settle in her, bones that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "You've hired someone younger," Charlotte smiled thinly. "Betsy Miller's daughter, Rebecca, just 18 and very capable. She'll arrive next week," so it was already arranged. Eleanor's hands tightened in her lap, the only outward sign of her distress. "And where do you propose I go?" William exchanged a glance with his wife before answering. "My cousin James has a place near Fredericksburg. He's agreed to take you in, for a reasonable monthly stipend, of course." "James Sullivan?" Eleanor couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "The man hasn't been sober since the Mexican War. His farm is little more than a shack with a failing corn patch." "He's family," William said firmly, as if that settled everything. "As am I," Eleanor replied, rising slowly to her feet. Despite her 46 years, she stood tall and straight-backed, her auburn hair streaked with silver pulled into a simple knot at the nape of her neck. Years of ranch work had left her slender but strong, her hands calloused from labor that would have broken most genteel women. William had the good grace to look uncomfortable, but Charlotte merely adjusted her embroidery hoop, her delicate fingers, never pausing in their work. "The stage to Fredericksburg leaves tomorrow morning," William said, reaching into his vest pocket. "I've purchased your ticket and arranged for James to meet you." Eleanor stared at the paper he extended toward her. "Tomorrow? We're in the midst of a storm, William. The roads will be washed out." "The weather is expected to clear by dawn," Charlotte said without looking up, "and with the Miller girl arriving, we'll need your room prepared." Eleanor felt her pulse quicken with a familiar anger, the same fire that had sustained her through countless hardships since coming west with her brother as a young woman of 24. She had never married, choosing instead to help Samuel build his dream after his wife died bearing William. She had been mother, aunt, teacher, and ranch hand, all rolled into one. And now, with a few cruel words, she was being discarded. "I would like some time to gather my possessions," she said with quiet dignity. William nodded, seemingly relieved the confrontation had not escalated. "Of course. Charlotte has arranged some trunks for you in your room." He hesitated, then added, "I'll have Miguel saddle Penny for you in the morning. You can take her to Fredericksburg." It was a small mercy. Penny was Eleanor's favorite mare. A gift from Samuel on her 40th birthday. The thought of leaving the ranch without the faithful horse would have been another unbearable loss. That night, Eleanor moved through her room like a ghost, selecting which parts of her life deserved to be packed into the 2 small trunks Charlotte had provided. 22 years, reduced to whatever could fit in a stagecoach hold. She chose practically warm clothing, her mother's wedding quilt, the medical herbs and tinctures she had collected and prepared over the years, her small collection of treasured books. At the bottom of the second trunk, wrapped carefully in oilcloth, she placed her most valuable possession, a Colt Patterson revolver that Samuel had taught her to shoot in the early days when Comanche raids were frequent. Ammunition for it went into a small leather pouch, along with the flint and steel she always carried. Through the window, she could see the storm still raging, belying William's confidence about clear morning skies. Eleanor knew the hill country, weather better than most men born to it. This storm had settled in for at least another day. The stage would likely be delayed, if it ran at all. Perhaps that's what gave her the courage to make her decision. By 3 in the morning, the household was deep in sleep. Eleanor moved silently through the darkened ranch house, dressed in her sturdiest riding clothes, buckskin pants beneath her wool skirt, a flannel shirt, and her brother's old leather vest that Charlotte had tried numerous times to discard. Her high leather boots were well worn but sturdy, perfect for long hours in the saddle. She left a note on the dining table, brief, dignified, with no hint of the rage and hurt that burned in her chest. She would not be going to Fredericksburg, nor would she be accepting William's charity. She had helped build this ranch from untamed wilderness. She would find her own way. The storm had gentled somewhat as she slipped out to the stables. Miguel, the old Mexican stable hand who had worked for the Sullivans since before William was born, was waiting with Penny already saddled. "You knew?" Eleanor said softly, not really surprised. Miguel nodded, his weathered face solemn in the lantern light. "The young master has forgotten the old ways, Senora. He treats family like cattle to be traded." He handed her the reins and a small oilskin package. Provisions. Not much, but enough for a few days. Eleanor took the bundle, emotion tightening her throat. "Thank you, old friend." "Where will you go?" Miguel asked, concern evident in his dark eyes. Eleanor mounted Penny with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime in the saddle. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us now. Back to the story. West, there are settlements along the Colorado River. Perhaps I can find work as a midwife or teacher. They both knew it was unlikely. Few settlements would welcome an unmarried woman of her age, especially one without family connections. But the alternative, the slow death of living under James Sullivan's roof, watching him drink away Williams, payments while treating her like a servant, was unthinkable. "Vaya con Dios," Miguel whispered as she turned Penny toward the western gate. "And you, my friend, watch over them." Despite everything, she couldn't help her concern for William and his family. They were still her blood, even if they had forgotten what that meant. The rain had reduced to a steady drizzle as Eleanor rode away from the only home she had known for more than 2 decades. She did not look back at the darkened windows of the ranch house. Looking back invited hesitation, and hesitation would kill her as surely as the coming winter. For 3 days, Eleanor pushed westward, following old trading paths and game trails. The storm had indeed lingered, just as she had predicted, turning streams into rushing torrents and making the terrain treacherously slick. Penny, ever faithful, carried her mistress without complaint, though Eleanor frequently dismounted to lead the mare through particularly difficult stretches. On the 4th day, as they crossed a rocky plateau, disaster struck. Penny stepped into a hole hidden by tall grass, the sickening crack of breaking bone audible even above the howling wind that had kicked up again. The mare went down hard, nearly trapping Eleanor beneath her. Eleanor's heart broke as she examined her beloved horse's leg. The break was clean but compound, the bone protruding through the skin. There would be no healing this, no splinting or herbs that could make this right. With tears streaming down her weathered cheeks, Eleanor did what a lifetime on the frontier had taught her was necessary. She took her revolver from her pack, whispered words of love and gratitude to the horse that had been her companion for 6 years, and ended Penny's suffering with a single shot. The sound echoed across the empty landscape, startling a flock of ravens into flight. As their black shapes wheeled against the grey sky, Eleanor allowed herself 10 minutes of silent grief before practicality reasserted itself. She salvaged what she could from her saddlebags, fashioned a carry pack from her blanket, and continued on foot. By nightfall, her situation had become dire. The temperature was dropping rapidly, and the wind carried the first biting hints of sleet. Her provisions were nearly gone. The terrain had become increasingly unfamiliar. Rocky outcroppings and twisted juniper trees, creating a landscape that seemed determined to confuse and mislead. As darkness fell completely, Eleanor found marginal shelter in the lee of a large boulder. She managed to gather enough dry kindling protected by overhanging rocks to start a small fire, its feeble warmth barely reaching her chilled bones. "Not like this," she whispered to herself, watching the flames dance weakly against the gathering night. Not alone in the wilderness, without purpose. She had faced death before, during the cholera outbreak of 44 that had nearly taken Samuel, during the great Comanche raid of 49 when she had defended the ranch house with nothing but her Patterson, and grim determination while William and his mother hid in the root cellar. Each time, she had faced the prospect with the courage born of necessity and the knowledge that her life had meaning. Now, as the sleet began to fall in earnest, stinging her face and sizzling in her struggling fire, Eleanor fought against the seductive pull of sleep that she knew would lead to freezing death. She recited poetry from memory, sang old hymns in a cracked voice, forced herself to stand and move, despite her exhaustion. It was during one of these desperate exercises, stamping her feet and swinging her arms to maintain circulation, that she first heard the sound of horses approaching. Eleanor's hand went immediately to her revolver. In these remote territories, riders could mean salvation or doom. Texas Rangers would help a stranded woman, bandits or deserters from the Mexican. War would bring a fate worse than freezing, but it was neither rangers nor outlaws who materialized from the sleet-filled darkness. The riders who surrounded her small camp moved with the silent efficiency of ghosts, their horses sure-footed on terrain that had nearly killed Penny. Even in the faint firelight, there was no mistaking their identity. Comanche. 5 warriors on paint ponies, their faces streaked with earth colors, their long hair adorned with feathers and beads. They carried rifles as well as traditional weapons, lances tipped with metal points, bows slung across strong backs. They regarded Eleanor, with expressions ranging from curiosity to suspicion. The leader dismounted, moving toward her with the fluid grace of a natural horseman. He was taller than the others, his face bearing the scars of many battles, his black hair streaked with a single white feather that ran from temple to shoulder. Unlike the others, he wore a necklace of silver conchos that caught the firelight. As he approached, Eleanor held her ground, the revolver steady in her hand, though she knew it would be useless against 5 warriors if they meant her harm. After years on the frontier, she knew enough Comanche phrases to attempt communication, though her accent was probably atrocious. "I seek no trouble," she said in their language, the unfamiliar words feeling clumsy on her tongue. "I travel alone." The leader's expression showed mild surprise at her attempt to speak his language. He responded in heavily accented but clear English. "Why white woman alone in Comanche hunting grounds? Where is your man? Your people?" The question struck at the heart of her shame and abandonment, but Eleanor kept her voice steady. "My family no longer wanted me. They said I was too old to be useful. I left rather than be sent away like an unwanted dog." The leader's dark eyes narrowed slightly as he translated her words for the others. There was a brief exchange, voices rising and falling in the complex Comanche language that Eleanor only partially understood. She caught fragments about white eyes and strange customs, and the coming storm. Finally, the leader turned back to her. "Storm comes, big storm. Snow will cover this place soon." He gestured to the pitiful remains of her fire. "You will die here." Eleanor lifted her chin slightly. "Then I will die free with my dignity intact." The warrior studied her for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, to her surprise, the corner of his mouth lifted in what might have been respect. "I am Tall Feather, war chief of the Quahadi Comanche," he said. "My people make winter camp in Protected Valley 1 day's ride from here. You will come." It wasn't a question or an invitation. It was a statement of fact. Eleanor hesitated, weighing her options. William had filled her head with tales of Comanche brutality since he was old enough to speak, stories of torture, captivity, and worse for white women taken during raids. But she had also heard other accounts from traders and travelers who had earned the trust of the Comanche people. Stories of honor, of adoption, of white captives who had chosen to remain even when offered the chance to return to their own kind. And in truth, she had no real choice. Stay and die from exposure, or go with these warriors and face an uncertain fate. "I will come," she replied simply. Tall Feather nodded once, then spoke to one of his warriors, who immediately dismounted and offered his horse to Eleanor. She packed her few belongings quickly and mounted the paint pony, surprised at how differently it felt from Penny, smaller, more responsive, with a different rhythm to its movements. As they rode into the sleet-filled night, Eleanor Sullivan cast one final glance back at her abandoned campsite. The pitiful fire was already dying, the sheltering boulder just another dark shape against the darker landscape. Ahead lay unknown territory in more ways than one: Comanche lands, Comanche people, and a future she could never have imagined when she left the S ranch just 4 days earlier. The sleet turned to snow as they traveled through the night, guided by Tall Feather's unerring sense of direction. Eleanor fought to stay alert in the saddle, her exhaustion and the hypnotic motion of the horse threatening to overcome her. Just when she thought she could no longer hold on, Tall Feather signaled a halt. Without a word, he rode alongside her and reached across to grip her arm, steadying her. "Not far now," he said, his deep voice carrying over the wind. "Stay strong, elder woman. My people will see your courage." Elder woman. The term startled Eleanor, for it carried none of the dismissive contempt she had heard in William's voice when he called her getting on in years. In Tall Feather's tone was something entirely different, a note of respect that warmed her more effectively than any fire could have done. As dawn broke, they crested a ridge, and Eleanor caught her first glimpse of the Comanche winter camp, spread out in a sheltered valley below. Dozens of tipis arranged in a great circle, smoke rising from their tops into the snowy sky. In that moment, exhausted and half-frozen, Eleanor Sullivan knew her life had irrevocably changed course. Like a river diverted by an earthquake, finding a new path to the sea. Eleanor awoke disoriented, her body aching from the arduous journey. Instead of the biting cold and howling wind, warmth surrounded her. She lay on soft buffalo robes, covered with finely tanned deerskin blankets. For a moment, she wondered if she had died after all, until the sounds of daily life penetrated her. Consciousness, voices speaking in Comanche, children laughing, the rhythmic scraping of someone working a hide. She pushed herself upright, wincing at the protest from her muscles. The teepee she occupied was spacious, the central fire burning. Low but steady. Various household items hung from the lodge poles, parfleches painted with geometric designs, medicine bundles, weapons and tools. Everything arranged with purpose and care. A movement at the entrance caught her attention. An elderly Comanche woman entered, her face deeply lined with age, yet her movements sure and graceful. She carried a wooden bowl of something steaming and fragrant. "You wake," the woman said in accented English. "Good. 2 sleeps you been gone from world." 2 days. Eleanor's voice was rough with sleep and thirst. The old woman nodded, kneeling beside her and offering the bowl. "Drink. Medicine good for strength." Eleanor accepted the bowl carefully. The liquid was dark and smelled of unfamiliar herbs, but she had learned long ago not to refuse hospitality, especially when so desperately needed. She sipped cautiously, finding the taste bitter but not unpleasant, with undertones of something like mint. "I am Grey Willow," the woman said, as Eleanor drank. "Mother of Tall Feather." Eleanor lowered the bowl, studying her hostess more carefully. Now that she knew to look, she could see the resemblance. The same proud carriage, the same intensity. In the dark eyes, though Grey Willows were clouded with the beginnings of cataracts. "I'm Eleanor Sullivan," she replied. "I owe your son my life." Grey Willow nodded, as if this was nothing remarkable. "He sees truth in people, says you have strong heart." Before Eleanor could respond, the teepee flap opened again, admitting Tall Feather himself. In the daylight, Eleanor could see him more clearly. He was perhaps in his early 40s, his face weathered by sun and wind, the scars she had noticed before evidence of a warrior's life. He wore a fringed buckskin shirt, decorated with intricate beadwork, leggings and moccasins. The silver concho necklace she had noticed before marked him as a man of importance. "You are awake," he said, his deep voice filling the tipi. "The fever has passed." "Fever?" Eleanor hadn't realized she'd been ill. Grey Willow interjected, "Cold sickness. Come in, night. Much sweat, much shake. I give medicine." She gestured to the bowl Eleanor still held. Tall Feather settled on a buffalo robe across the fire from them. "My mother is medicine woman, knows many plants, many healings. She save you as much as warriors who find you." Eleanor inclined her head toward Grey Willow. "Then I owe you my thanks as well." "No debt between us," the old woman replied with surprising firmness. "All people help when needed. This is way." Tall Feather watched this exchange with interest. "You speak some of our tongue," he observed. "Not common for white woman." Eleanor set the empty bowl aside. I've lived on the frontier for 22 years. I learned from traders, from a friendly band that sometimes camped near our creek during summer months." She hesitated, then added, "Knowledge is never wasted, my brother always said." "Your brother? Who cast you out?" Tall Feather's question was direct without artifice. "My brother died 6 years ago," Eleanor corrected. "It was his son, my nephew, who decided I was no longer useful." Grey Willow made a sound of disgust. "White eyes forget old wisdom, think only young have value." She gestured to herself. "I have seen 65 winters. Still heal, still teach, still respected." Her eyes narrowed slightly. "How many winters? For you?" 46, Eleanor replied. Grey Willow cackled, genuinely amused. "Young woman still, many years to give good medicine, good wisdom." The contrast between this assessment and William's dismissal of her as too old to contribute properly couldn't have been more stark. Eleanor felt something loosen in her chest, a knot of shame and hurt she hadn't fully acknowledged even to herself. Tall Feather spoke again, his tone businesslike. "Council will meet tonight. Decide about you." Eleanor's momentary sense of ease evaporated. "Decide what exactly? If you stay, if you go, where you go, if not stay." He held up a hand as Eleanor tensed. "No harm will come, but winter deep now. No travel safe until spring thaw." "I understand," Eleanor said carefully. What would staying entail?" Tall Feather exchanged a look with his mother before answering. "You work. All people work. Here, you have skills." Eleanor considered. What skills did she have that would be valued in a Comanche winter camp? "I can sew, though not as beautifully as your people. I know herbs and medicines for common ailments. I was midwife to several. Women on neighboring ranches. I can read and write English, if that has any value here." Grey Willow nodded approvingly. "Healer hands, I see when you sleep. Fingers move like gathering plants, mixing medicine." "My mother says you help her," Tall Feather translated. "Learn our plants, our ways. Teach some of our young ones your writing." "Marks." His expression remained neutral. "Council will decide." With that, he rose and left the teepee as silently as he had entered. Grey Willow remained, studying Eleanor with keen interest. "My son," she said after a moment, "lose his wife 3 winters past. Sickness take her. Take unborn child too." She made a gesture Eleanor didn't understand. His heart closed since then, speaks little, smiles never. Eleanor wasn't sure how to respond to this personal revelation. "I'm sorry for his loss, for yours as well." Grey Willow acknowledged this with a slight nod. "You rest more. Need strength for council." She rose with surprising agility for her age. "Later, show you camp. Meet people." After the older woman left, Eleanor carefully tested her strength by standing. Her legs were shaky, but supported her weight. She found her clothes, cleaned and dried, folded neatly nearby. Her few possessions had been arranged with respect. Her books stacked carefully, her herbs and tinctures placed on a small woven mat, her revolver positioned where she could easily reach it. The consideration shown for her belongings spoke volumes. She had not been treated as a prisoner or even as a curiosity, but as a guest deserving of dignity. By late afternoon, Eleanor felt strong enough to venture outside with Grey Willow. The Comanche winter camp was larger than it had appeared from the ridge, perhaps 40 teepees arranged in a great circle, with clan groupings evident in their positioning. At the center was a larger structure that Grey Willow identified as the council lodge. The snow had stopped, but the air remained bitterly cold, the ground frozen solid beneath their feet. Still, the camp hummed with activity. Women worked at a variety of tasks, scraping hides, smoking meat, weaving baskets. Men repaired weapons and tools or gathered in small groups, discussing matters Eleanor couldn't hear. Children darted. Among the tippees engaged in some kind of game involving a small leather ball. Everyone they passed regarded Eleanor with open curiosity, but not hostility. Grey Willow introduced her to several women, speaking rapidly in Comanche, and occasionally translating the essential points for Eleanor's benefit. This red blossom makes best pemmican in tribe, or sky woman here, expecting child when spring. Grass first shows. Eleanor noted how Grey Willow was treated with universal respect, the women listening attentively to her words, some touching her arm in a gesture that seemed to convey both affection and deference. Age here was clearly not considered a liability, but a valuable asset. As twilight gathered, a drum began to sound from the council lodge. Grey Willow led Eleanor back to Tall Feather's teepee, where clean buckskin clothing had been left for her, a simple dress, leggings, and a warm robe. "Council wants see you as guest, not enemy," Grey Willow explained. "These clothes show respect." Eleanor changed quickly, appreciating the practical warmth of the garments. The dress was far more comfortable than the restrictive clothing she'd grown used to at the ranch, allowing freedom of movement while providing protection against the cold. Grey Willow nodded approvingly when Eleanor emerged. "Good. Strong woman looks right in proper clothes." She adjusted the drape of the robe across Eleanor's shoulders. "Now, we go face council." The council lodge was lit by a large central fire, the smoke rising through an opening in the top. Around the fire sat 12 men, the elders and war leaders of the band, Eleanor assumed. Tall Feather was among them, his face solemn in the flickering light. Grey Willow led Eleanor to a place directly across from the leaders, indicating she should sit. Then, surprisingly, the old woman took a place among the council members. Eleanor realized that Grey Willow's status as medicine woman gave her a voice in tribal governance, another striking difference from white society, where women had no official say in community decisions. The oldest of the council members spoke first, his words translated by a younger man who sat beside him. "I am Walks Far, eldest of the Quahadi Comanche. For many winters I have led council." His face was deeply lined, his hair completely white, yet his eyes were sharp and clear. "You are Eleanor Sullivan, from White Settlement east of our hunting grounds." Eleanor inclined her head respectfully. "I am. Tall Feather tells us your people cast you out, left you to die because your seasons were too many." The elder's expression conveyed his bewilderment at such a concept. "This true?" "It is," Eleanor replied, fighting the shame that threatened to color her voice. "My nephew believed I had become a burden, that I could no longer contribute enough to earn my place." A murmur ran through the council at this. The translator continued, "Council wishes to understand what skills you have, what value you bring to people who take you in." It was a fair question, one that cut to the heart of her situation. In this moment, Eleanor realized that the Comanche Council was offering her what William had not, the chance to prove her worth on her own terms. "I have knowledge of healing plants and medicines," she began, speaking slowly to allow for translation. "I have delivered many babies safely, tended wounds, set broken bones, treated fevers and fluxes. I can read and write the white man's words, which might be useful in understanding their papers and treaties. I can sew, cook, preserve food for winter storing." She paused, then added with quiet dignity, "I am not afraid of work, and I learn quickly. If there are skills your people value that I do not yet possess, I am willing to learn them." When the translation finished, several council members nodded approvingly. Grey Willow spoke up, her voice carrying surprising authority as she gestured toward Eleanor and then made a motion like mixing medicines. Tall Feather translated his mother's words. "Grey Willow says your hands know the way of plants, says you have healer spirit she recognizes, offers to teach you Comanche medicine ways. If council agrees, you stay," another council member spoke, his tone questioning. Tallfeather responded at length, occasionally pointing toward the eastern horizon, the direction of white settlements, Eleanor assumed. Finally, Walks Far raised his hand, silencing the discussion. He spoke directly to Eleanor, his eyes holding hers as the young translator conveyed his words. Council has decided. Until Springgrass returns, you will stay with Quahadi people. Learn our ways. Share your knowledge. When warm days come, Council meet again. Decide if you stay longer or if we help you find new path among your own kind. Eleanor bowed her head in acceptance and gratitude. Thank you for this chance. I will. Work hard to honor your trust. As the council dispersed, Tallfeather approached her. In the firelight, his expression seemed less stern than it had before. You will stay in my mother's tepee, he said. She is alone since my sister joined her husband's band last summer. Says she welcomes company of another healer. Your mother is very kind, Eleanor replied. I'm grateful for her generosity. Tallfeather studied her for a moment. She sees something in you, something familiar. He seemed to struggle for the right words. Like recognizes like, even across different worlds. Before Eleanor could respond, he continued, Tomorrow I show you camp properly, where water comes from, where boundaries are. His tone made it clear. These were security concerns, not mere courtesy. For now, rest, moon of hard winter only beginning, many cold days ahead. As Eleanor followed Grey Willow to what would now be her home for at least the next few months, she felt a strange mixture of emotions. Uncertainty about her future, certainly. Lingering hurt from William's rejection, but also, unexpectedly, a flicker of something that felt dangerously like hope. Here, among people she had been taught to fear, her age was not seen as a liability, but as an indication of experience worth respecting. Her knowledge was valued, her skills recognized. For the first time since Samuel's death, Eleanor Sullivan felt she might yet find a place where she truly belonged. Days melted into weeks as winter tightened its grip on the Comanche camp. Eleanor adapted to the rhythm of life among the Quahadi, people with surprising ease. Each morning, she rose before dawn with Grey Willow, helping to kindle the fire and prepare the morning meal, a simple porridge of ground corn and dried berries. Then came the daily tasks, gathering water from the ice-rimmed stream that ran through the sheltered valley, collecting firewood and learning the complex art of Comanche medicine from Grey Willow's patient instruction. The old woman proved to be a demanding but fair teacher. She showed Eleanor how to identify medicinal plants, even in their winter dormancy, how to prepare poultices from stored barks and roots, how to diagnose illness through subtle signs that Eleanor's ranch medicine had often overlooked. White healers, see body only, Grey Willow explained one afternoon as they worked together, preparing a treatment for a child's persistent cough. Comanche healers see spirit also, body and spirit connected like braid in hair. Eleanor absorbed these lessons eagerly. She had always had an affinity for healing work, but her knowledge had been limited to what she could learn from books and frontier experience. Grey Willow's approach was more intuitive, more holistic, connecting symptoms to the whole person in ways that often yielded better results. In return, Eleanor shared what she knew. Her ability to read and write English soon proved valuable when a trader passed through, bringing news and official papers from the territorial authorities. Eleanor was able to decipher the stilted legal language that spoke of new boundaries, new restrictions and thinly veiled threats. They speak with forked tongue, Tallfeather said, after Eleanor translated one particularly concerning document, a notice about the establishment of a new military outpost 30 miles to the east. Paper says protection, but means control. Yes, Eleanor agreed, troubled by the implications. I've seen this pattern before. The government makes promises while preparing to break them. Tallfeather studied her with those intense, dark eyes. that still made Eleanor feel as though he could see straight through to her thoughts. "You speak truth about your own people. Not common." "Truth is truth," Eleanor replied simply. "My heritage doesn't change that." Something shifted in Tall Feather's expression, a subtle softening around the eyes, gone so quickly Eleanor might have imagined it. "Come," he said abruptly. "Council wants to hear more about this paper. You translate exact words, no softening." As Eleanor stood to follow him, she realized that a significant boundary had been crossed. The council was inviting her to participate in tribal governance, trusting her to represent white words accurately to Comanche ears. It was a responsibility she hadn't anticipated, and one she took very seriously. That night, as winter winds howled outside the council lodge, Eleanor carefully translated the government notice, explaining the nuances and hidden meanings behind the official language. The council listened intently, asking pointed questions that revealed a sophisticated understanding of white political tactics. "They will send more soldiers before spring grass," Walksfar concluded after lengthy discussion. "We must decide. Fight, move deeper into hunting grounds, or parley." Eleanor remained silent, knowing it wasn't her place to offer opinions on such matters. But Tall Feather surprised her by asking directly, "What do you think, Healer Woman? What white soldiers do if we send peace talk?" The title, Healer Woman, was new. Until now, she had been called simply by her name or referred to as the White Woman. This designation signified acceptance, recognition of her growing role in the band. Eleanor chose her words carefully. "In my experience, individual soldiers can sometimes be reasonable men, but they follow orders, and those orders come from officials far away who see only the Indian problem, not Comanche people. Any parley would need to be approached with extreme caution." Her frank assessment earned grunts of approval from several council members. Grey Willow, seated in her place of honor, nodded sagely. The discussion continued late into the night, with Eleanor providing cultural context when asked. No final decision was reached. Such important matters required consideration over multiple council sessions, but Eleanor left the lodge feeling she had contributed something meaningful to her adopted community. Grey Willow was already asleep when Eleanor returned to their shared tipi. Moving quietly so as not to disturb the elderly woman, Eleanor added wood to the banked fire and settled onto her sleeping robes, reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed in the span of a moon cycle. From discard to valued advisor. From outsider to accepted, if still separate. It was more than she could have hoped for when William had pronounced her too old to keep. A noise at the teepee entrance drew her attention. Tall Feather stood silhouetted against the night sky, his expression unreadable in the darkness. "Walk with me," he said quietly, the words somewhere between invitation and command. Eleanor hesitated only briefly before reaching for her robe. The night was bitterly cold, but something in Tall Feather's tone suggested this conversation couldn't wait until morning. Outside, the full moon bathed the sleeping camp in silver light. Their breath formed clouds in the frigid air as Tall Feather led her toward a small rise at the edge of the encampment. Neither spoke until they reached the summit, where a lightning-struck oak provided a natural windbreak. "You spoke well in council," Tall Feather said finally, gazing out over the moonlit landscape. "No fear, no false words to please." "I only shared what I believed to be true," Eleanor replied. "A truth between different peoples, rare gift." He turned to look at her directly. "My mother says your spirit older than your years, says you lived many lives in this one." Eleanor wasn't sure how to respond to this assessment. "I've certainly seen my share of hardship and joy." "Tell me," Tall Feather said, settling onto a fallen log and gesturing for her to join him. "Tell story of Eleanor Sullivan before winter storm bring her to Quahadi." It was the first time he had expressed any personal interest in her past. Until now, their interactions had been primarily functional, focused on camp matters, translations, or practical concerns. Eleanor hesitated. Her story seemed unremarkable compared to the rich spiritual traditions of the Comanche. But Tall Feather waited with the patient stillness that characterized so much of his behavior. "I was born in Tennessee," she began, finding her way into the narrative. "My father was a school teacher with dreams of western lands. When I was 12, he moved our family, my mother, my brother Samuel, and me, to the Texas frontier." She described the hardships of those early years, the rough cabin they built with their own hands, the struggle to establish crops in unfamiliar soil, the constant vigilance against raids, not just from Comanche, but from bandits and deserters, who preyed on isolated homesteads. "Mother died of fever the second winter," Eleanor continued. "Father followed 3 years later when his horse threw him crossing a swollen creek. That left just Samuel and me. I was 19, he was 23. Tall Feather listened without interruption as she recounted how she and Samuel had transformed their struggling homestead into a successful cattle ranch. How Samuel had married a gentlewoman from San Antonio who gave him a son, William, but died birthing their second child, a daughter who lived only hours. "I raised William as my own," Eleanor said, her voice softening at the memories. "Taught him his letters, nursed him through childhood illnesses, showed him the ways of the ranch. I never married. There were few suitable men on the frontier. And as years passed, I found I preferred independence to the constraints of wifehood. No desire for own children?" Tall Feather asked, the question direct but not judgmental. Eleanor considered this. "I suppose William was enough, and later his children. I was content with my role as aunt and helper." She sighed. "Until I wasn't needed anymore." Tall Feather was silent for a long moment. "Your brother, he would approve how his son treated you?" "Samuel would have been ashamed," Eleanor said with certainty. "He believed family obligations were sacred. But Samuel has been gone 6 years, and William—" She trailed off, unwilling to speak ill of her nephew despite everything. "William forgets old ways," Tall Feather finished for her. "Thinks new always better than what came before." "Yes," Eleanor agreed, surprised by his insight. "That's exactly it. Everything must be newer, bigger, more modern, including the people who run his household, apparently." Tall Feather made a dismissive gesture. "Foolish thinking. Tree without roots falls in first strong wind." They sat in companionable silence, watching the moonlight play across the frozen landscape. Eleanor found herself studying Tall Feather's profile, the strong line of his jaw, the proud carriage of his head, the quiet dignity that seemed to radiate from him even in repose. Grey Willow had mentioned he was a widower. Looking at him now, Eleanor wondered what kind of woman his wife had been, what kind of father he might have been to the child that never arrived. As if sensing her thoughts, Tall Feather spoke again. "My wife, lost bird, she was medicine woman like my mother. Knew songs to call rain in dry times, to ease pain of wounded. Child she carried would have been first son." His voice remained steady, but Eleanor sensed the depth of sorrow beneath the simple words. "I'm truly sorry," she said softly. 3 winters now she walks spirit path," Tall Feather continued. "First winter, anger filled me, fought many battles, took many risks, hoped to join her." His hands, resting on his knees, curled into fists at the memory. "Second winter, emptiness only, like hollow tree, still standing but no life inside." "And the third winter?" Eleanor asked gently. Tall Feather turned to look at her, his expression softened by the moonlight. "Third winter brings strange thing. White woman with healer hands and truth-speaking mouth. Woman cast out by own people who understand something of loss." The intensity of his gaze made Eleanor's breath catch. There was something in his words. Recognition of shared experience, perhaps even the suggestion of a connection forming that both thrilled and frightened her. Before she could respond, a cry came from the camp below, someone calling Tallfeather's name with urgency. They both rose immediately, and Tallfeather led the way down the slope, moving with the sure-footed grace that still impressed Eleanor after weeks of observing him. In the center of the camp, a small group had gathered around a horse and rider just arrived. The rider, a young warrior Eleanor recognized as Swifthawk, was speaking rapidly, his gestures animated despite obvious exhaustion. Tallfeather joined the group, listening intently. After a moment, he turned to Eleanor. "Soldiers," he said grimly. "Many soldiers, camping at Redwater Creek. 2 days' ride from here." Eleanor's stomach tightened with apprehension. "How many?" "Swifthawk counts 40, maybe more. Bring big guns that roll on wheels." "Artillery," Eleanor translated, her concern deepening. "Field cannons. This isn't a routine patrol, it's a show of force." She hesitated, then asked, "Did they see him?" "No, he was watching." Tallfeather relayed the question. Swifthawk shook his head emphatically, pantomiming how he had observed from a concealed position. The camp was fully awake now, people emerging from tippies to learn what was happening. Grey Willow appeared at Eleanor's side, her face grave as she took in the situation. "Council meets now," Tallfeather announced. "All warriors, all medicine people." He turned to Eleanor. "You come too, need your knowledge of soldier ways." As they followed Tallfeather toward the council lodge, Grey Willow gripped Eleanor's arm. "Bad sign," the old woman said softly. "Soldiers bring death when snow's still deep." Eleanor couldn't disagree. The timing was ominous. Military expeditions typically waited for spring, when travel was easier and supply lines more reliable. A winter campaign suggested urgency or preparation for something larger to come with the thaw. Inside the council lodge, the mood was tense but disciplined. Warriors and elders found their places around the central fire with minimal discussion. Eleanor and Grey Willow were directed to sit near Tallfeather, a position of honor that signified their input would be valued. Walks Far opened the council with a brief prayer to the spirits for guidance. Then Swifthawk repeated his report in greater detail, describing not only the number of soldiers but their equipment, the layout of their camp, the direction of their approach. When he finished, all eyes turned to Tallfeather. As war chief, his assessment would carry significant weight. "Soldiers come for purpose," he said, his deep voice filling the lodge. "Not just show strength. They prepare something bigger." He turned to Eleanor. "You understand white soldier mind. What they want in deep winter?" Eleanor felt the weight of every gaze. These people had taken her in, shared their food and knowledge, given her purpose when she had been discarded. Now they looked to her for insights that might help protect them from her own race. "There are several possibilities," she began carefully. "They might be establishing a forward position for a larger campaign in spring. They might be responding to reported raids, though I've seen no evidence of raiding from this band." She paused, considering. "Or they might be coming to enforce the new boundaries mentioned in that government notice, pushing Comanche bands further west, away from traditional hunting grounds." A murmur ran through the assembly as this was translated. Eleanor continued, "Whatever their purpose, 40 soldiers with artillery represent serious intent. They won't be easily turned aside." "We fight?" asked a young warrior eagerly. "Many soldiers died in surprise attack." "And many Comanche would die as well," Eleanor responded, more sharply than she intended. She softened her tone. "Those big guns can throw metal balls that explode on impact, tearing apart everything nearby. They can fire from distances beyond arrow or rifle range." Grey Willow spoke up, her voice carrying surprising authority. "Fighting not only way, Quahadi people survive many winters by knowing when to fight, when to move, when to watch and wait. Walksfar nodded agreement. Wise words. We must consider all paths. The discussion continued for hours, strategies proposed and debated. Some advocated immediate relocation deeper into Comanche territory. Others suggested splitting the band into smaller groups to become less tempting targets. A few still argued for preemptive attack. Throughout, Eleanor provided context when asked, explaining military protocols, command structures, the differences between regular army units and volunteer militias, often more brutal and less disciplined. As dawn approached, Walksfar called for a decision. We have heard many voices. Now we must choose one path. To Eleanor's surprise, he looked directly at her. Healer woman has shared much wisdom of white ways. Council would hear your thought on best path for Quahadi people. Eleanor felt the enormous responsibility of the moment. Whatever she advised would affect the lives of everyone in the camp, people who had shown her kindness when her own family had not. If you seek my honest counsel, she said carefully, I believe the safest course is strategic withdrawal, but not panic or flight. Move the camp in stages, carefully concealing your trail. Send scouts to monitor the soldiers' movements. If they are simply establishing a seasonal outpost, you can return to these hunting grounds after they withdraw. If they intend permanent occupation, she let the implication hang in the air. Grey Willow translated her words. After much discussion, Walksfar raised his hand for silence. Council has decided. We move camp at midday. Women, children, elderly, go first to Sacred Canyon, 3 days west. Warriors stay to watch soldiers, protect retreat if needed. He looked to Tallfeather. War Chief will organize. Tallfeather nodded once, already focused on the tactical challenges ahead. The council dispersed quickly, each person moving to prepare for the sudden journey. As Eleanor followed Grey Willow back to their teepee to begin packing, she found Tallfeather walking beside her. You go with first group, he said. Help my mother with journey. Eleanor stopped short. I should stay. I could help if there's contact with the soldiers, translate, negotiate. Tallfeather's expression hardened. Too dangerous. If soldiers find white woman with Comanche, they think captive. Try rescue with bullets and big guns, but no argument. His tone was final. You protect my mother, she protect you. Both reach Sacred Canyon safely. His stern expression softened slightly. Our talk under stars, not finished. We continue. When danger passed, before Eleanor could respond, he turned away, already calling to his warriors to organize the camp's defense. She watched him go, struck by the curious mixture of emotions his words had stirred, frustration at being sent away from the potential conflict, concern for his safety, and a warm, unexpected flutter at his implied promise of future conversations. Grey. Willow touched her arm, drawing her attention back to the urgent preparations. Come, much to do before sun reaches high place. As they worked to pack the essential supplies and medicines, one question burned in Eleanor's mind. If confrontation came between the Comanche and the soldiers, where did her loyalty truly lie? The answer, she realized with mild shock, was no. Longer as clear as it once would have been. The journey to the Sacred Canyon was arduous. 3 days of hard travel through rugged terrain, the winter wind cutting like knives through even the thickest buffalo robes. The Quahadi people moved with practiced efficiency. Tipis dismantled and packed, possessions sorted by necessity, the elderly and children placed on travois, pulled by sturdy ponies. Eleanor marveled at how quickly the entire camp had transformed, from settled village to moving column. Grey Willow rode on a travois alongside the other elders, though she had initially insisted she could walk. Eleanor alternated between walking and riding one of the pack horses, helping wherever she was needed, adjusting lodge poles that threatened to slip, calming children frightened by the sudden departure, preparing medicines for those who struggled with the harsh conditions. By the second day, Eleanor began to worry about Grey Willow. The old woman's breathing had become labored, a persistent cough developing despite the herbal remedies Eleanor prepared each night. "It's nothing," Grey Willow insisted when Eleanor expressed concern. "Old lungs protest cold air. We'll pass." But it didn't pass. By the time they reached the sacred canyon, a hidden valley protected by towering sandstone walls, accessible only through a narrow passage easily defended, Grey Willow was burning with fever, her cough now bringing up alarming streaks of blood. While the rest of the band established the new camp, Eleanor focused entirely on treating the elderly medicine woman. She combined Comanche remedies Grey Willow had taught her with treatments she'd used on the ranch, creating a comprehensive approach to the pneumonia she suspected had taken hold. "You learn well," Grey Willow murmured between racking coughs, watching Eleanor prepare a poultice of crushed juniper berries and pine resin. "Hands already know what mind's still learning." "Save your strength," Eleanor urged, gently applying the warm mixture to Grey Willow's chest. "Let the medicine work." For 3 days and nights, Eleanor barely left the old woman's side. She spooned broth between cracked lips, bathed the fever-hot skin with cool cloths, burned sacred herbs that Grey Willow indicated would help clear the lungs. Other women from the band came to assist, their faces grave as they witnessed their most respected healer now requiring healing herself. On the 4th night, Grey Willow's fever broke. Eleanor, exhausted from her constant vigil, wept with relief when the old woman's eyes opened clear and lucid for the first time in days. "You call my spirit back," Grey Willow said softly, her voice hoarse but stronger. "Death was reaching with in cold hands, but your medicine stronger." Eleanor shook her head, wiping away tears. "We called you back together. Your knowledge guided my hands." Grey Willow reached out, clasping Eleanor's wrist with surprising strength. "No false modesty. Important. You understand what happened." Her dark eyes held Eleanor's with fierce intensity. "Power passed between us. My healing gifts recognize your spirit as worthy vessel." Eleanor didn't know how to respond to this mystical interpretation. She was a practical woman who believed. Intangible remedies, herbs that reduced fever, poultices that drew out infection. Yet something profound had occurred during those long nights of healing work, a connection that transcended her rational understanding. "Rest now," she said finally, adjusting the buffalo robes around Grey Willow's frail shoulders. "We'll speak more when you've regained your strength." But their conversation was interrupted by a commotion outside the teepee. Voices raised in excitement, people running toward the canyon entrance. Eleanor stepped outside to see what was happening. A group of warriors had arrived, scouts from the party that had remained behind to monitor the soldiers. The band gathered around them eagerly, hungry for news. Eleanor's heart clenched when she realized Tall Feather was not among them. She approached the group, anxiety making her steps quick despite her exhaustion. One of the warriors, Black Wolf, a fierce young man who had always regarded Eleanor with skepticism, was speaking rapidly in Comanche. The expressions of those listening grew increasingly concerned. An English-speaking woman named Morning Star noticed Eleanor and moved to her side. "Soldiers attacked Quahadi warriors 2 days ago," she explained in halting English. "Many bullets, big guns that boom. 3 warriors walk Spirit Path now." "And Tall Feather?" Eleanor asked, unable to keep the fear from her voice. Morning Star's expression softened slightly. "War Chief alive but wounded. Arrow Woman tend him now." Arrow Woman was the band's most skilled healer after Grey Willow, a middle-aged woman who specialized in battle injuries. If she was treating Tall Feather, His wounds must be serious. Where is he? Eleanor asked. Morning Star pointed toward a teepee being hastily erected near the center of the camp. They bring him there. Very weak from arrow inside, much blood lost. Without hesitation, Eleanor hurried toward the teepee. She had to see for herself, had to know how badly Tall Feather was injured. The intensity of her concern surprised her. When had this proud, stoic warrior come to matter so much? Arrow Woman was just emerging from the teepee as Eleanor approached. The healer's hands and forearms were stained with blood, her expression weary. "How is he?" Eleanor asked in Comanche, one of the phrases she had mastered over the past weeks. Arrow. Woman studied her for a moment before responding in her limited English. "Arrow break rib, pierce lung, much bleeding inside. I take arrow out, stop blood, but—" She made a gesture Eleanor interpreted as uncertainty. "Fever comes soon. Spirit. Might leave. May I see him?" Eleanor asked. Arrow Woman hesitated, then nodded. "He ask for you when fever start. Say need tell you something." She held the teepee flap open. "Go, not long." The interior was dimly lit by a small fire. Tall Feather lay on a bed of buffalo robes, his upper body bare except for bandages wrapped tightly around his torso. Blood had already seeped through the layers of cloth. His normal bronze complexion had faded to an ashen hue, and his breathing came in shallow, painful gasps. Eleanor knelt beside him, gently taking his hand. His skin, burned with the beginning fever Arrow Woman had predicted. "Tall Feather," she said softly. "I'm here." His eyes fluttered open, taking a moment to focus on her face. "Eleanor." His voice was barely a whisper. "My mother." "She's recovering. She took ill on the journey, but the fever broke last night." Relief flickered across his pain-tightened features. "Good. She is needed." "As are you," Eleanor said firmly. "So you must fight this fever and heal." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You give orders to War Chief now?" "I give orders to a stubborn patient," Eleanor replied, matching his attempt at humor despite her worry. "What happened?" Tall Feather's expression darkened. "Soldiers find our old camp. Track which way we go. War party try lead them away from canyon, but—" He was interrupted by a coughing spasm that brought fresh blood to his lips. Eleanor quickly supported his shoulders, helping him clear his lungs while minimizing the pain from his wounded side. When the coughing subsided, she used a damp cloth to wipe the blood away. "Don't try to speak more now. Save your strength." Tall Feather gripped her wrist with surprising strength. "Must tell, soldiers have White Scout with them. Man who knows these lands knows Quahadi ways." His eyes held hers with burning intensity. "Man named Sullivan." Eleanor felt as though the ground had dropped away beneath her. "Sullivan? Are you certain of the name?" Tall Feather nodded weakly. "Heard soldiers call him. Said Sullivan knows. Indian tricks better than Indians." A roaring filled Eleanor's ears as implications cascaded through her mind. Sullivan was not an uncommon name, but the coincidence seemed too great. Could it be James, her dissolute cousin whom William had proposed? She lived with? Or even William himself, pursuing some vendetta against the woman who had defied his dismissal? "Did you see this man?" she asked urgently. "Can you describe him?" But Tall Feather's eyes had closed, his strength finally exhausted. His breathing remained labored, each inhalation causing a bubble of blood at the corner of his mouth. Eleanor sat back on her heels, mind racing. If William or James was guiding the soldiers, the danger to the Quahadi band, and to her, was even greater than she had feared. Someone who knew the terrain, who understood Comanche movement patterns, could lead the military straight to the sacred canyon. Arrow Woman entered the teepee, carrying fresh bandages and a pot of medicinal paste. She assessed Tall Feather's condition. With experienced eyes. "Fever rising," she said grimly, "lung filling with blood." Eleanor forced herself to set aside the disturbing news about the Sullivan scout. Tallfeather's immediate survival took precedence over everything else. "I helped cure Grey Willow's lung sickness," she said. "Let me help you with him." Arrow Woman studied her thoughtfully, then nodded. "2 healers better than 1. You know, white medicine for inside wounds?" Eleanor considered the resources available. "I know some treatments that might help, yes, but I'll need your guidance on Comanche healing ways." For the next several hours, the 2 women worked together to combat Tallfeather's worsening condition. Arrow Woman showed Eleanor how to prepare a special tea from yucca root and a rare fungus that grew on cottonwood trees, a Comanche remedy for internal bleeding. Eleanor contributed techniques she had learned treating ranch hands with similar injuries, including positioning to help drain the wounded lung. By nightfall, Tallfeather's fever was raging. He alternated between periods of restless unconsciousness and brief moments of delirious wakefulness, during which he sometimes spoke to people who weren't there: his dead wife, fallen comrades, his father long gone to the spirit path. Once, his eyes focused on Eleanor with startling clarity. "The White Scout," he murmured. "Young man, eyes like yours. William, it had to be." Eleanor's stomach knotted with a complex mixture of emotions. Betrayal that her nephew would hunt her. Fear for the Quahadi people who had taken her in. Guilt that her presence might have brought this danger upon them. Toward midnight, Grey Willow appeared at the teepee entrance, leaning heavily on a walking stick, but insistent on seeing her son. Eleanor made space for the elderly woman beside Tallfeather's bed. Grey Willow took one look at her son and began singing softly, a healing song in Comanche that rose and fell like the wind through canyon walls. She motioned for Arrow Woman to join her, then, surprisingly, beckoned Eleanor to complete their circle around the wounded war chief. 3 healers, 3 powers, Grey Willow explained between verses. Old ways, new ways, joined ways, circle strongest medicine. Through the long night, they maintained their vigil. Grey Willow with her songs and spiritual guidance, Arrow Woman with her deep knowledge of battle wounds, Eleanor with her practical experience of nursing critically ill patients. Separately, they might have failed. Together, they created something powerful enough to combat the shadow of death that hovered over Tallfeather. Dawn was breaking when the crisis passed. Tallfeather's fever broke suddenly, his body drenched in sweat that Eleanor recognized as healing rather than symptom. His breathing eased, the bubbling blood at his lips ceased, and he fell into the deep, peaceful sleep of recovery rather than the restless tossing of illness. Grey Willow laughed softly, a sound of pure joy. "He returns to us. Spirit chooses life path." Arrow Woman nodded, satisfaction evident in her tired face. "Strong man, strong healers." She looked at Eleanor with new respect. "You have good medicine." But Eleanor's relief at Tallfeather's improvement was tempered by the knowledge that danger still approached. Danger she had inadvertently brought to these people. As Arrow Woman left to rest and Grey Willow settled beside her son to watch over his sleep, Eleanor stepped outside the teepee. The camp was stirring to life, people emerging to begin their daily tasks. Several nodded respectfully to her, word of her role in healing both Grey Willow and now the war chief having spread through the band. She had earned a place among them, a place she might now endanger by remaining. A decision crystallized in her mind, painful but necessary. She would have to leave the Quahadi people. If William was indeed tracking her, her presence put the entire band at risk. Perhaps if she surrendered herself to the soldiers, explained that she had never been a captive but a guest, the military might be persuaded to leave the Comanche in peace. It was a slim hope, but it seemed the only honorable path. Eleanor returned to the tipi she shared with Grey Willow to gather her few possessions. She would need to move quickly before the scouts reported the soldiers' latest position. There would be no opportunity to explain to Tall Feather. He needed uninterrupted, healing sleep. Perhaps it was better this way. Cleaner, less painful for both of them. She was packing her small medicine bundle when a shadow fell across the teepee entrance. Walks Far, the eldest council member, stood there, his ancient face grave. Council meets. "Now," he said in his own language, which Eleanor had come to understand fairly well. "You must come. I cannot leave Grey Willow alone," Eleanor protested. "She's still weak from her illness." "She is in council already," Walks Far replied. "Matter concerns all Quahadi people. And you." Eleanor's heart sank. Had they somehow divined her plan to leave? Or worse, had they connected the Sullivan scout to her and drawn their own conclusions about her trustworthiness? She followed Walks Far to the council lodge, anxiety building with each step. Inside, the full council had assembled, including Grey Willow, who looked frail but determined. Arrow Woman was there as well, along with the warriors who had returned, with news of the soldiers. To Eleanor's surprise, Black Wolf, the young warrior who had always regarded her with suspicion, was speaking as she entered. He fell silent as she took her place, his expression unreadable. Walks Far resumed his position at the head of the council. "Eleanor Sullivan," he began formally. "Black Wolf brings news that touches you closely. He has seen the White Scout who leads soldiers toward our camp." Eleanor steeled herself. "I believe it may be my nephew, William Sullivan. If so, I'm the cause of this danger to your people, and I'm prepared to—" Walks Far held up a hand, silencing her. "Scout is not your nephew," he nodded to Black Wolf. "Tell what you saw." Black Wolf spoke in Comanche, his words translated by a council member with better English. "I follow soldiers yesterday, hiding in rocks above their camp. White Scout argues with Soldier Chief. I hear names, Captain Miller and Scout James Sullivan. Scout is drinking firewater, speaking loud. Eleanor's cousin James, then. Somehow that was both better and worse than William." Black Wolf continued. "Scout says he knows where Woman is taken, says Comanche camp in Sacred Canyon, says for $50 in gold. He show way." The warrior's eyes narrowed. "Then he say thing that make me come fast to tell council. He say his cousin there, woman named Eleanor, who inherit many cattle when brother die. Woman worth much money. If returned to nephew." Eleanor felt the blood drain from her face. "That's not possible," she whispered. "I inherited nothing. Samuel left everything to William." Grey Willow spoke then, her voice weak but clear. Black Wolf heard true. No mistake. "There. Must be," Eleanor insisted. "William cast me out because I was a burden, an expense he could no longer justify." The council members exchanged glances. It was Arrow Woman who finally spoke, her limited English sufficient to communicate the critical point. "If brother leave you cattle, land, money, why nephew say nothing? Why send away if you rich woman?" The question hung in the air, forcing Eleanor to confront a possibility she had never considered. That William had lied to her, had cast her out, not because she was a burden, but because her continued presence threatened his claim to property that legally belonged to her. "I don't know," she said finally. "I never saw my brother's will. William managed all legal matters after Samuel's death. I trusted him completely." Walks Far nodded slowly. Trust between family sacred, breaking such trust great evil. He looked around the council circle. "Now we understand why soldiers hunt so hard, not just for Comanche, for white woman worth many cattle, much land." Eleanor felt sick with betrayal. If this is true, if my brother left his property to me rather than William, then my nephew sent me into the wilderness to die, so he could claim everything for himself. "And now sends cousin to find you," Grey Willow added. "Not from care, from fear you live and tell truth." The full council discussed the implications at length. Eleanor sat in numb silence, her worldview reshaping itself around this new, painful reality. All those years of devotion to William and his family, all her sacrifices to help build and maintain the ranch, and he had repaid her with calculated betrayal. Eventually, Far called for silence. Council has decided. Quahadi people, move deeper into territory tomorrow. Place soldiers cannot find even with scout. You, Eleanor Sullivan, have choice. Eleanor looked up, meeting the old man's gaze. You can go to soldiers, he continued. Return to White World. Fight nephew for what is yours by right. Or, he paused, his expression softening slightly, you can stay with Quahadi people. Continue. As healer, teacher, friend, choice must be yours alone. It was the choice Eleanor had been preparing to make on her own, though with different information and different motivation. Now, knowing William's true betrayal, the calculus had changed entirely. I need time to consider, she said finally. This news about my brother's will. It changes much. Far nodded. Tonight you think. Tomorrow you decide. But know this. His eyes held hers with surprising warmth. Quahadi people already decide about you. You prove yourself as healer, as truth speaker, as strong heart. You have place here if you choose it. As the council dispersed, Eleanor remained seated, overwhelmed by conflicting emotions and difficult choices. Return to fight for her rightful inheritance, or remain with people who valued her wisdom and experience rather than seeing them as liabilities? Grey Willow touched her shoulder gently. Come, my son, awake now, asks for you. Eleanor followed the old woman back to Tallfeather's tipi, her mind still reeling from the council's revelations. Whatever decision she made would shape the rest of her life, and perhaps the lives of the Quahadi people who had become her unlikely family in the depths of a Texas winter. Rachel and Richard arrived at my door with calculated smiles and a bottle of expensive wine. My daughter was dressed as if for a celebratory occasion, in a silk blouse and tailored pants, her highlighted hair freshly styled. Richard had come directly from his office, still in his business suit, with the addition of a cashmere sweater that likely cost more than my monthly pension. "Mom, you look wonderful," Rachel exclaimed, embracing me carefully as if I might shatter. "The home recovery is clearly agreeing with you," Richard nodded approvingly. "Independent living suits you, Eleanor, though you really should have help with dinner preparations in your condition." I smiled, leaning on my walker. "I managed just fine, and I had some assistance earlier." I didn't mention that Judith had helped me prepare everything in advance, ensuring I wouldn't need to navigate the kitchen extensively during their visit. "Well, we bring good news," Rachel announced as they followed me into the dining room. Her eyes darted momentarily to the folder on the sideboard, but quickly returned to me. "Richard has been working on some financial solutions for your situation." "Has he?" I replied mildly, gesturing for them to take their seats at the table. "How thoughtful!" Richard looked pleased with himself as he helped me into my chair. "I've been exploring several options that could resolve your medical bills without depleting your savings or requiring this risky lawsuit." I served the casserole, taking my time. "I'm all ears." Richard launched into what was clearly a rehearsed presentation detailing a comprehensive financial restructuring that would optimize my assets and ensure my comfortable future. Translated from financial advisor jargon, his plan involved selling my house, liquidating my modest investment portfolio, and moving into Sunrise Village's smallest available unit, all managed, of course, by him as my financial proxy. I listened patiently, noting how Rachel nodded at strategic moments, her expression a practiced blend of concern and encouragement. When Richard finally paused for breath, I dabbed my lips with my napkin and smiled. "That's certainly an extensive plan," I observed. "You must have put considerable thought into it." "We've been concerned, Mom," Rachel interjected. "Ever since Your surgery, we've been worried about your financial stability. These medical bills could wipe out everything you've worked for. And this lawsuit business, Richard added with a dismissive wave. Litigation is unpredictable and stressful. At your age, the last thing you need is a protracted legal battle. I took a sip of water. It's remarkable how well-informed you both are about my legal options, especially you, Richard. His smile faltered slightly. Well, I have some contacts in the legal community. Professional networks, you know. Yes, I believe Gregory Winters. At Memorial Hospital is one of those contacts, I said casually. The sudden silence in the room was profound. Rachel's fork paused midway to her mouth, and Richard's expression froze in a mask of polite confusion that didn't quite reach his eyes. I don't believe I know who, he began, but I cut him off gently. Let's not play games, Richard. I have copies of your email correspondence with Memorial's CFO discussing how to prevent me from pursuing my lawsuit. I gestured toward the folder on the sideboard. Along with the real estate valuation for my house that you commissioned 3 weeks. Ego and the Sunrise Village payment calculations. Rachel recovered first, setting down her fork with exaggerated care. Mom, I don't know what you think you've discovered, but whatever it is, you're misinterpreting it. We're trying to help you. By selling my house at below market value, by transferring my assets into your control without my knowledge or consent, by actively undermining my legal case against a hospital that nearly killed me through negligence. My voice remained calm, though my hands trembled slightly. That's a curious definition of help. Richard abandoned his confused facade, his expression hardening. Eleanor, be reasonable. Your medical situation has created financial vulnerability that needs management. Yes, I've been exploring options for your house, because it's an untapped resource that could solve your financial problems. And yes, I've spoken with hospital representatives about alternatives to litigation, because lawsuits are messy, unpredictable, and rarely beneficial to the plaintiff, especially when the plaintiff's son-in-law manages investment portfolios for the defendant, I noted. Rachel slammed her hand on the table, wine glasses trembling with the impact. Enough! This is absurd. We're your family. We're looking out for your interest when you clearly can't see the bigger picture. The bigger picture being what's most convenient and profitable for you? I asked. Don't be dramatic, Rachel snapped. This isn't some soap opera where we're villains plotting against you. This is real life, where medical bills have consequences, and elders sometimes need guidance with major decisions. I studied my daughter's face, the defensive anger, the righteous indignation that had always been her shield when confronted with uncomfortable truths. Rachel, when you needed help after your divorce, I gave you and the children a home. No? Questions asked. When Madison needed private school tuition, I provided it, asking nothing in return. I never saw those as burdens because that's what family does, supports each other in times of need. And we're trying to support you now, she insisted. No, I said quietly, you're trying to control me. There's a profound difference. Richard cleared his throat, clearly shifting to a different strategy. Eleanor, regardless of how you characterize our intentions, the financial realities remain. Your medical bills exceed your liquid assets. The house requires maintenance you can't physically manage. And Sunrise Village offers services that would improve your quality of life. All valid points, I conceded, if my circumstances were unchanged. But they aren't. What does that mean? Rachel demanded. I took a deep breath. I met with Memorial Hospital's legal counsel this morning, based on the documented negligence in my case and certain improper communications between hospital executives and interested parties. I glanced meaningfully at Richard. They're prepared to offer a settlement. Richard's professional composure cracked. What settlement? What are you talking about? Full forgiveness of all medical bills related to the complications, I began, watching their expressions shift from confusion to disbelief. Plus, compensatory damages. Compensatory damages, Rachel repeated. How much? I smiled slightly. My attorney believes the final figure will be close to $850,000. The silence that followed was deafening. Rachel and Richard exchanged stunned glances, clearly recalculating their approach to me and my assets in light of this new information. Richard recovered first, his financial advisor persona sliding back into place. Eleanor, that's remarkable news. But you should be cautious about settlement offers. Sometimes they're less generous than they appear when you analyze the fine print. Perhaps if you let me review the terms will be reviewed by my attorney, James Webber, I replied firmly. The same attorney you dismissed as an ambulance chaser to my face while privately worrying about his competence in your emails to Mr. Winters. Richard had the grace to look embarrassed, though whether at his deception or at being caught, I couldn't determine. Rachel was still processing the settlement information. $850,000, she repeated, her voice hollow. And they're just giving it to you? Not giving, Rachel. Compensating. For their negligence, for the pain and additional procedures their error caused, for the weeks of hospitalization that should never have been necessary. But that's life-changing money, she stammered. Yes, I agreed simply. It is. Richard leaned forward, his expression suddenly earnest. Eleanor, with that kind of settlement, financial planning becomes even more crucial. Tax implications alone could be significant. You'll need professional guidance. I've already arranged for an independent financial advisor, I informed him. Someone recommended by James, with no connections to Memorial Hospital. The barely concealed flash of frustration on Richard's face confirmed what I'd already suspected. He'd been counting on managing my settlement funds as part of his comprehensive financial restructuring. Rachel pushed her plate away, her dinner barely touched. I don't understand why you're being so hostile. We're family. Of course we wanted to help manage your finances and make sure you're properly cared for. That's what children do for aging parents. Is it? I asked softly. Is that why you hid power of attorney documents in my files, hoping I'd sign them without reading the fine print? Is that why you explored selling my house without my knowledge or consent? Is that why Richard secretly communicated with hospital executives to undermine my legal case? You're twisting everything, Rachel protested, though her voice lacked conviction, making it sound sinister when it was just practical planning. Practical planning would have involved open conversations with me about my wishes and needs, I countered. Not behind-the-scenes machinations while I was medically vulnerable. Richard abruptly stood, straightening his sweater with exaggerated precision. I think we should continue this discussion when emotions aren't running so high. Clearly, there have been misunderstandings on all sides. No misunderstandings, Richard, I replied calmly. I understand perfectly what you both intended. The question is whether you understand why it was wrong. Rachel rose as well, her expression hardening into something cold and unfamiliar. So that's it. You get a windfall settlement and suddenly we're the villains in your story, after everything we've done for you? The irony of her statement, the complete reversal of our actual relationship dynamic, might have been comical if it weren't so painful. What exactly have you done for me, Rachel? Since my surgery, what tangible support have you provided, beyond visiting occasionally with takeout food I don't even like? She flushed, struggling to formulate a response. We've been busy with the renovation and Tyler's travel schedule, but that doesn't mean... Madison has visited nearly every day, I interrupted gently. She mowed my lawn, organized my medications, and rearranged furniture to accommodate my walker, all while maintaining her summer internship and studies. Madison has always been impractical with her time, Rachel dismissed, though I caught the flicker of shame in her eyes. Some of us have responsibilities. Yes, I agreed. We do. My responsibility now is to protect myself from those who would take advantage of my vulnerability, even if they happen to be family. Richard placed a restraining hand on Rachel's arm. We should go. This conversation isn't productive. As they moved toward the door, I remained seated, suddenly feeling every one of my 68 years in my bones. Rachel, I called, as they reached the entryway. I need to ask you something. She turned, her expression guarded. What? When did it change? When did our relationship become so transactional that you could plan to dismantle my life without a moment's moral hesitation? For a brief moment, something like genuine emotion flickered across my daughter's face. Regret, perhaps, or a glimmer of the child she had once been, but it vanished quickly, replaced by the defensive mask she'd worn throughout our conversation. You just don't understand the real world, Mom. You never have. With that parting shot, she followed Richard out the door. I sat alone in my dining room, the meal barely touched. The confrontation I'd anticipated now concluded. It had gone almost exactly as I'd expected, yet the reality of my daughter's betrayal still cut deep. I'd raised her alone after her father died, working extra jobs to ensure she never felt deprived, celebrating her successes and comforting her. Her failures. Somewhere along the way, that love and sacrifice had transformed in her mind into entitlement and resentment. My phone rang. Judith, right on schedule. Well, she demanded without preamble, how did it go? About as expected, I replied, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. They showed their true colors. And the settlement news? Did that shake them up? Like an earthquake. I managed. A small laugh. Richard immediately tried to position himself to manage the funds. Rachel seemed more shocked that I'd stood up to them than by their own behavior being exposed. Are you okay? Judith's voice softened. Really okay? I considered the question seriously. The confrontation had been draining, the revelation of my daughter's true character painful beyond measure. And yet, alongside the grief, was something unexpected, a sense of clarity, of burdens being set down rather than taken up. Not yet, I answered honestly, but I will be. After hanging up with Judith, I made my way slowly to my bedroom, eschewing the walker for the first time in weeks. My hip ached with each step, a reminder of the physical ordeal that had precipitated this family crisis. But the pain seemed more manageable somehow, less consuming than before. On my nightstand sat a framed photograph of Rachel's college graduation, my daughter resplendent in cap and gown, my arm around her shoulders, both of us beaming with pride and possibility. I touched the glass gently, tracing the outline of her smiling face. "Oh, Rachel," I whispered to the empty room. When did we lose our way? The following morning, I awoke to multiple text messages from Madison, clearly distressed. Grandma, Mom and Dad came home furious last night. Dad kept saying something about breach of confidentiality, and Mom's been crying and yelling. What happened? I called her immediately, explaining the confrontation in measured terms, careful not to vilify her parents, despite their actions. "They're saying you're paranoid," Madison reported. "That you've misinterpreted everything and the settlement is making you irrationally suspicious." "That's not unexpected," I replied. "People rarely acknowledge their wrongdoing when confronted." "What happens now?" Madison asked, her voice small. "With the family, I mean." It was the question I'd been asking myself throughout the sleepless night. What happens to a family when trust is shattered so comprehensively? When the bonds you thought were unbreakable proved to be conditional, easily sacrificed for financial gain? "I don't know," I admitted. "That will depend largely on your parents. But Madison, whatever happens between me and them doesn't change anything between you and me. You understand that, right?" "I know, Grandma. She paused. I told them I knew what they were planning, that I was the one who found the documents. My heart sank. Oh, Madison, you didn't have to do that. Yes, I did, she replied with surprising firmness. I'm not going to let them rewrite what happened. They were wrong, and they need to own that. Before I could respond, my call waiting beeped. James Weber calling. Madison, I need to take this. We'll talk more later. James wasted no time on pleasantries. Eleanor, I've just received a call from Memorial's legal counsel. They're accepting our settlement terms with only minor modifications. I gripped the phone tighter. All of them? The full compensation amount? 800,000, he confirmed. Slightly lower than our ask, but still substantial and complete. Forgiveness of all outstanding medical bills, which effectively adds another 120,000 in value. Relief washed over me in a dizzying wave. When will it be finalized? We can sign the agreement this afternoon. The funds would be disbursed within 30 days. James sounded as pleased as I'd ever heard him. This is an excellent outcome, Eleanor. Far better than most medical negligence cases, especially resolved. This quickly, after ending the call with James, I sat on the edge of my bed, allowing the full impact of the news to settle over me. The settlement meant freedom. From crushing medical debt, from financial dependency, from the vulnerability that had made me a target for exploitation. My phone rang again, Judith this time. Just checking in, she said when I answered. How are you feeling this morning? Better than expected, I replied truthfully. James just called. The hospital has accepted the settlement offer. Judith let out a whoop of delight that made me hold the phone away from my ear. I knew it. Their legal team must have realized what a disaster a public trial would be, especially with those emails from Richard. Apparently so. I smiled at her enthusiasm. James is bringing the paperwork this afternoon. I'm coming over to celebrate, she declared, and I'm bringing that bottle of champagne we've been saving. It's not even 10 in the morning, I protested. Laughing. Fine, no champagne until noon, but I'm still coming over. Her voice softened. You shouldn't be alone today, Eleanor. This is a victory worth celebrating. After hanging up, I made my way carefully to the bathroom, studying my reflection in the mirror. The woman who gazed back at me looked tired, the lines around her eyes deeper than I remembered, her silver hair in need of styling. But there was something else there too. A steadiness in her gaze, a quiet determination in the set of her jaw that hadn't been there before. I thought about Rachel and Richard, probably still reeling from last night's confrontation, recalibrating their approach now that their original plan had collapsed. I thought about Madison, standing firm in her principles despite the cost to her relationship with her parents. And I thought about the long road still ahead, physical recovery, emotional healing, and the reconstruction of family relationships that might never be the same. The settlement was a resolution to the legal and financial aspects of my ordeal, but the personal betrayal remained an open wound. How do you reconcile with family members who saw your vulnerability as an opportunity for exploitation? How do you rebuild trust after discovering such calculated deception? These weren't questions I could answer in a single morning, or perhaps even in the coming months. But as I prepared for Judith's arrival and James's visit with the settlement paperwork, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before my surgery. Hope. Not the desperate kind that clings to illusions, but the grounded sort that acknowledges painful realities while still believing in the possibility of healing. My phone chimed with a text message from Madison. Whatever Mom and Dad say, I'm proud of you, Grandma. You taught me what real strength looks like. I smiled, typing back. And you taught me that family is defined by actions, not just blood. I love you, sweetheart. Setting down my phone, I moved toward the kitchen to make coffee. Each step a little steadier than the day before, The lawsuit against Memorial Hospital was ending, but the deeper reclamation of my life was just beginning. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.